Commander Zethkar stood tall on the bridge of his massive warship and looked at the blue planet floating in space before him. His dark scales gleamed under the bright lights as he studied the world that would soon belong to the Dominion Empire. Earth was just another rock with creatures living on it. Nothing more than the 17th world he would add to his growing list of victories. The reptilian commander had spent 20 years conquering worlds across the galaxy, and he knew the pattern well. First came the fear when his fleet appeared in their skies, then desperate attempts at communication, followed by weak resistance that crumbled within days. Every species he had faced followed the same predictable path from defiance to surrender. War was as familiar to him as breathing. Lieutenant Craven approached with a data pad containing the final intelligence report about Earth. The information made Zethkar's lips curl into what passed for a smile among his kind. These humans were even more primitive than the crystal beings of Veltar or the water-dwellers of Merdan. They still used chemical rockets to barely escape their own atmosphere, and their weapons fired simple metal projectiles instead of energy beams. "Commander, the human military possesses nuclear weapons but no energy shields," Craven reported, in the crisp tone expected of Dominion officers. "Their largest vessels are made of crude metal and cannot travel faster than light without external assistance. Their population centers are completely undefended against orbital bombardment." Zethkar nodded as he absorbed this information. Nuclear weapons were dangerous to the species that created them, but useless against Dominion shield technology. The humans were like children playing with fire, while adults watched from a safe distance. Their metal ships would crumble like paper against plasma cannons, and their cities would burn like dry grass under the might of his fleet. The standard protocol was simple and had never failed. Zethkar would broadcast the usual surrender demand, giving them 72 of their hours to submit to Dominion rule. When they refused, as they always did initially, he would demonstrate his power by destroying one of their smaller cities. The shock would break their spirit, and their leaders would beg for mercy within a day. He had used this exact strategy 17 times, and it worked perfectly every time. The Veltari had surrendered after watching their crystal spires melt under plasma fire. The Merdan had submitted when their coral cities boiled away in superheated water. Every species learned the same lesson eventually. Resistance was futile against the Dominion. "Open communication channels to the planet," Zethkar commanded as he straightened his ceremonial armor. The recording would be broadcast to every corner of Earth simultaneously, ensuring no human could claim ignorance of their situation. The message was standard and efficient. "People of Earth, I am Commander Zethkar of the Dominion Empire. Your world now falls under our protection and control. You have 72 of your hours to surrender unconditionally. Lay down your weapons, evacuate your military installations, and prepare for integration into our empire. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. Compliance will ensure your survival as valued workers in the Dominion. Choose wisely." Zethkar expected the usual response pattern. First would come frantic communications between their various governments as they realized the hopelessness of their situation. Then desperate attempts to negotiate terms or buy time. Finally, acceptance of their fate as the reality of Dominion power became clear. Instead, the response came surprisingly quickly from someone identified as President Harrison of the United Earth Defense Coalition. The message was shorter than expected and contained only 4 words that made Zethkar's eyes narrow in confusion. "Come and take it." The commander replayed the message twice to ensure he had understood correctly. Such defiance was unusual, but not unprecedented. Some species required a demonstration of power before accepting reality. The Veltari had responded with similar bravado before watching their first city turn to molten glass. "Prepare orbital bombardment systems," Zethkar ordered as he turned away from the communication console. "Target their largest population center and select appropriate yield for maximum psychological impact without complete sterilization. These humans will learn respect for Dominion power. The crew moved with practiced efficiency as they prepared for what would surely be another routine: conquest. Weapon systems hummed to life across the fleet as targeting computers identified major human cities. Energy collectors began gathering power for the plasma cannons that would soon rain fire from the heavens. Zethkar felt a familiar satisfaction as he watched his officers work. Soon the humans would see what happened to species that defied the Dominion. Their primitive metal ships would be swept aside like insects, and their leaders would plead for the chance to serve their new masters. Within a week, Earth would be just another conquered world in the growing Dominion Empire. The commander had no way of knowing that humanity had been listening to Dominion communications for months, learning their tactics and preparing for this moment. He could not imagine that a species barely capable of interplanetary travel had spent 18 months transforming their entire civilization into a weapon designed specifically to defeat his kind of warfare. As the Dominion fleet moved into attack, formation above Earth, Zethkar remained confident that this would be his easiest victory yet. War was familiar to him, and he had never met an enemy capable of changing the rules. He could not conceive that he was about to encounter a species that did not merely fight wars but transformed war itself into something he would never recognize. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the underground command center buried 3 miles beneath the Colorado mountains and watched the alien fleet position itself in high orbit around Earth. Banks of monitors showed the massive ships moving into formation like dark clouds gathering before a storm. Every human on the planet knew this moment would come, but seeing it happen still sent ice through her veins. 18 months ago, deep space monitoring stations had detected the first hyperspace signatures at the edge of the solar system. Strange. Energy patterns that did not match any known natural phenomenon had appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the void. At first, scientists thought they had discovered a new type of stellar event, but the patterns were too regular and too purposeful to be random. Dr. Lisa Chang had been the first to suggest the signals were artificial and might represent some form of faster-than-light travel. Her team at the Deep Space Research Institute had been monitoring similar signals from other star systems for years without understanding their significance. When the signals began appearing closer to Earth, the terrible truth became clear. Someone was coming. The unified Earth government had formed overnight when undeniable proof of approaching aliens reached every major capital simultaneously. Old enemies became allies, and decades of international competition transformed into desperate cooperation. Humanity had 18 months to prepare for contact with a species that could cross interstellar space at will, while Earth could barely maintain a small research station on Mars. Captain Ben Rodriguez had commanded commercial cargo ships before the crisis, but now found himself in charge of humanity's first stealth combat squadron. His ships were small and fast, built using every breakthrough that 18 months of frantic research could produce. They carried weapons that existed only in theory until the moment humanity realized survival depended on making theory into reality very quickly. The breakthrough had come from intercepted alien communications that revealed how the invaders operated. The Dominion Empire used the same tactics against every species they encountered because those tactics always worked. Overwhelming orbital bombardment followed by ground invasion and forced surrender had succeeded on 17 different worlds across 3 galactic sectors. But intercepted transmissions also revealed weaknesses in Dominion technology that no previous enemy had been able to exploit. Their energy shields operated on specific frequencies that could be bypassed using certain types of matter conversion. Their targeting systems relied on detecting metal and energy signatures that could be fooled with proper countermeasures. Morrison had spent those 18 months planning a kind of warfare that no enemy of the Dominion had ever attempted. Instead of trying to match alien technology directly, humanity would use its greatest advantage: the ability to think in ways that aliens could not predict or understand. When the alien bombardment began, targeting major population centers with devastating plasma weapons. Those cities were already empty. Months of careful evacuation had moved civilians to hidden underground shelters, while elaborate holographic projections made the cities appear fully inhabited. The aliens were destroying shadows and illusions, while real targets remained safely hidden. Captain Rodriguez received the attack signal and led his squadron out of their concealment in the asteroid belt where they had waited for this moment. His ships moved like deadly ghosts through space, their stealth systems hiding them from Dominion sensors as they approached the alien fleet from unexpected angles. The weapons his ships carried were Dr. Chang's masterpiece, devices that converted matter directly into focused energy bursts that bypassed Dominion shields entirely. Instead of trying to overpower alien defenses, they simply ignored those defenses and struck at the vulnerable ships hiding behind them. 3 Dominion cruisers vanished from existence before their crews even realized they were under attack. One moment they were preparing to bombard another Earth city, and the next moment they were expanding clouds of superheated gas drifting through space. The alien fleet suddenly found itself fighting an enemy that did not follow any known patterns of space combat. Commander Zethkar watched his tactical display in growing confusion as more ships disappeared from his formation. His sensors could not detect the attacking vessels, and his shields were useless against weapons that seemed to ignore basic laws of physics. For the first time in 20 years of conquest, he felt something he barely recognized: uncertainty. The human counterattack continued for 6 hours as Rodriguez's squadron picked apart the alien formation with surgical precision. Each destroyed ship created more confusion as Dominion commanders tried to understand how an enemy with primitive technology was defeating their superior fleet. Their return fire struck nothing but empty space as human ships danced between their shots like deadly spirits. When the immediate threat ended, Morrison emerged from her command bunker to survey the first day of the war that would determine humanity's fate. Burning alien wreckage fell through Earth's atmosphere like shooting stars, while the remaining Dominion fleet retreated to a safer distance to regroup and reassess their enemy. The aliens had expected to face another primitive species with predictable tactics and conventional weapons. Instead, they had encountered something unprecedented in their experience, a species that had studied them first, learned their weaknesses, and prepared specifically to exploit those weaknesses using creativity rather than raw power. Dr. Chang's teams were already analyzing wreckage from the destroyed alien ships, reverse engineering technology that should have been centuries beyond human understanding. But humanity had learned to compress centuries of development into months when survival was at stake. Every piece of alien equipment would be studied, understood, and improved upon using human innovation. Morrison knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would adapt to human tactics eventually, and the next phase of the war would be even more dangerous. But humanity had achieved something no other species in Dominion history had accomplished. They had made the conquerors afraid. The blue planet that Commander Zethkar had expected to add easily to his collection was proving to be something entirely different. Earth was not just another world to be conquered, but a species that refused to accept conquest as inevitable. The Dominion was about to learn that some prey could become predators when pushed beyond their limits. Colonel Jake Peterson crouched in the hidden bunker complex beneath the Rocky Mountains and studied the tactical displays showing alien ground forces landing across North America. The Dominion had adapted to the space ambush by sending down heavy assault troops to secure key locations on the surface. Their commanders believed that controlling the planet's surface would force humanity to surrender even if their space forces remained hidden. The aliens moved in standard formation toward what their intelligence identified as major military installations and population centers. They expected to find cowering civilians and scattered military remnants hiding in primitive bunkers. Instead, they walked into carefully prepared killing fields where every human knew exactly what they had to do. Peterson had spent 18 months preparing for this moment, and his preparations were unlike anything the Dominion had ever encountered. Every man, woman, and child on Earth had been trained for war. Not just soldiers, but teachers, doctors, farmers, and children who could barely hold weapons. When survival of the species was at stake, every human became a warrior. The first alien patrol to enter the ruins of Denver found the city apparently deserted. Empty streets stretched between abandoned buildings while the wind carried dust through broken windows. Their sensors detected no life signs, and their commanders concluded that the bombing had been successful in driving away the local population. The attack came from every direction at once. Hidden in sewers, inside buildings, and buried in tunnels that should not have existed, human fighters opened fire with weapons designed specifically to penetrate alien armor. The patrol never had a chance to call for help, as concentrated fire turned their advanced equipment into smoking wreckage. But the ambush was just the beginning. As more alien forces moved to investigate, they discovered that humans did not fight like any enemy the Dominion had previously encountered. When wounded soldiers ran out of ammunition, they detonated explosives to take aliens with them. When positions became untenable, defenders melted away into tunnel systems that honeycombed every major city. Dr. Angela Foster worked in a laboratory hidden deep beneath the ruins of Chicago and focused on weapons that no alien empire had ever faced. Her team had developed biological agents specifically designed to target Dominion physiology based on tissue samples recovered from the destroyed ships. But these were not simple poisons or diseases. Foster's creations were adaptive viruses that evolved faster than alien medical technology could develop countermeasures. Each infection taught the virus how to become more effective against Dominion biology. The aliens found their own immune systems being turned against them by microscopic enemies that learned from every encounter. The ground war became a nightmare for Dominion forces, as they realized that conquering Earth would require killing every single human on the planet. Civilians who appeared to surrender would guide alien patrols into traps. Children carried messages between resistance cells using communication networks that the aliens could not detect or disrupt. Entire cities became death traps, where every building might hide enemies. Captain Ben Rodriguez had survived the space battle and now led raids against alien supply depots using captured enemy equipment. His teams had learned to operate Dominion technology better than some alien crews. Human adaptability allowed them to modify alien weapons and vehicles in ways their original designers never intended. The moment that changed everything came when Rodriguez's squad captured an intact Dominion command vehicle during a raid on an alien base outside Los Angeles. Inside, they found not just weapons and supplies, but access to the Dominion's military communications network. Within hours, human technicians had cracked the alien codes and were listening to every order sent between Dominion commanders. What they learned was shocking. Commander Zethkar was reporting to his superiors that Earth was unlike any world the Dominion had ever attempted to conquer. His forces were taking casualties at rates that should have been impossible against such a primitive species. Every victory came at such a cost that it felt more like a defeat. The aliens had experience with desperate resistance, but human warfare was fundamentally different. Other species fought to delay the inevitable or to negotiate better terms of surrender. Humans fought as if defeat was simply not an option, as if their entire species would choose extinction rather than submit to alien rule. Peterson coordinated the resistance from his underground command post and watched reports flow in from around the globe. In Asia, human fighters had turned entire mountain ranges into fortresses that alien forces could not breach. In Europe, urban warfare had reduced major cities to rubble that favored human defenders over alien attackers. In Africa, desert fighters used hit-and-run tactics that left alien supply lines constantly under threat. The Dominion had expected Earth to fall within days like every other world they had conquered. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a war that grew more expensive with each passing hour. Their troops were dying from diseases they could not cure, weapons they could not counter, and tactics they could not predict. But the real shock came when human forces began using captured alien technology, not just to fight, but to communicate. With other species, the Dominion had conquered. Foster's laboratory had reverse-engineered Dominion hyperspace communication systems and was broadcasting messages to enslaved worlds throughout the galaxy. The messages were simple but revolutionary. The Dominion could be defeated. Humanity was proving that technological superiority meant nothing against a species that refused to accept defeat. Every alien ship destroyed, every ground force eliminated, and every Dominion plan that failed became proof that the Empire was not invincible. Commander Zethkar found his carefully organized invasion becoming a chaotic struggle for survival as his forces faced an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. The humans were not just fighting the Dominion, but learning from them, adapting to them, and turning their own strengths against them. For the first time in Dominion history, a conquered species was teaching others how to resist. The war for Earth was becoming something much larger and more dangerous than a simple planetary conquest. It was becoming a revolution that could spread across the galaxy and threaten the entire foundation of the Dominion Empire. 3 months after the invasion began, Dr. Lisa Chang worked frantically in her underground laboratory complex while explosions from the battle above shook dust from the ceiling. Her team had accomplished something that should have been impossible. They had not only reverse-engineered captured Dominion technology, but had improved it using principles that alien engineers had never considered. The breakthrough had come from studying how Dominion artificial intelligence systems operated. Where alien technology relied on rigid programming and predictable responses, human innovation focused on adaptive systems that could be modified in the field. Chang's team had discovered that Dominion AI was vulnerable to a kind of mental virus that spread through their networked command structure. Captain Sandra Mitchell commanded the engineering teams responsible for retrofitting captured alien vessels with human modifications. Her crews worked around the clock to convert Dominion warships into hybrid machines that combined alien power with human creativity. The results were vessels that confused both sides of the conflict because they operated in ways that neither species had ever seen before. The first hybrid ship had been a captured Dominion frigate that Mitchell's team had completely rebuilt from the inside out. They kept the alien hull and power systems, but replaced the weapons, shields, and control systems with human technology that had been designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Dominion defensive systems. When the hybrid frigate entered combat, for the first time it destroyed 3 alien cruisers in less than 10 minutes. The Dominion commanders could not understand how one of their own ships was using weapons that bypassed their shields and targeting systems that predicted their movements with impossible accuracy. Lieutenant Commander Alex Torres had made the discovery that changed everything about human understanding of alien technology. During his interrogation of captured Dominion officers, he found that human neural patterns could interface directly with alien artificial intelligence systems in ways that confused and disrupted their normal operation. Human thought processes were apparently so different from those of the Dominion and their previous enemies that contact with human minds created a kind of mental chaos in alien AI systems. Where Dominion intelligence was logical and predictable, human thinking was creative, intuitive, and willing to attempt solutions that should not work, but somehow did. Torres had volunteered for the first experiment in direct neural interface with captured Dominion computer systems. The result was immediate and dramatic, as human consciousness spread through the alien network like a digital plague. Dominion AI systems began making decisions that followed human logic rather than alien programming. The effect was devastating. To Dominion military operations, ships that should have been coordinating their attacks instead began operating independently. Weapons systems that should have targeted human forces started firing on their own allies. communication networks that should have carried orders started transmitting human propaganda to Dominion troops throughout the solar system. Major Ryan. Cooper led the assault team that used this new weapon against the primary Dominion command ship orbiting Earth. His soldiers had been equipped with neural interface devices that allowed them to hack alien systems simply by thinking at them. The boarding action was unlike anything in the history of space warfare. Cooper's team did not fight their way through the alien ship in traditional combat, but instead convinced the ship's own systems to fight against the crew. Doors that should have been locked open for human soldiers while remaining sealed against alien defenders. Weapons that should have protected Dominion officers turned on their own operators. Life support systems began favoring human invaders over alien crew members. Commander Zethkar watched in horror as his flagship turned against him. The ship that had been his mobile command center for 20 years of conquest suddenly became a prison controlled by an enemy that seemed to think in ways his species could not comprehend. Emergency bulkheads sealed him away from his own bridge, while human-corrupted AI systems announced that the vessel was now under Earth Defense Coalition control. The neural virus spread throughout the Dominion fleet as human-modified AI systems contaminated every ship they could reach. Alien crews found themselves fighting not just human forces, but their own technology as their most advanced systems began operating according to human rather than Dominion logic. Dr. Chang's laboratory had become the center of a technological revolution that was reshaping the entire war. Her teams were producing weapons that learned from each battle, adapting to overcome whatever defenses the aliens deployed against them. Combined with human tactical flexibility and the determination of a species fighting for its survival, these adaptive weapons represented something entirely new in galactic warfare. The Dominion had built their empire on technological superiority and predictable tactics that overwhelmed primitive enemies through raw power. But humans were proving that creativity and adaptability could overcome any technological advantage when combined with the desperate innovation of a species that refused to accept defeat. Captain Mitchell's hybrid ships were already preparing for the next phase of human operations. Intelligence gathered from captured alien systems had revealed the location of Dominion staging areas and supply bases throughout the local region of space. Earth was no longer simply defending itself, but preparing to carry the war directly to enemy territory. The transformation was remarkable to observe. In less than 4 months, humanity had evolved from a species barely capable of interplanetary travel to a civilization that could modify and improve technology centuries beyond their original capabilities. Desperation had accelerated human development at a rate that should have been impossible, but was happening anyway. Major Cooper reported from the captured command ship that Dominion communication networks were carrying reports of rebellions on other conquered worlds. Species that had submitted to alien rule years or decades earlier were suddenly rising against their oppressors using tactics and weapons similar to those developed on Earth. The war for Earth had become something much larger than a single planetary conquest. It had become a galactic uprising against the Dominion Empire, led by a species that had turned their apparent weaknesses into devastating strengths. Human creativity, adaptability, and refusal to surrender were spreading across the galaxy like a revolution that threatened to destroy the entire foundation of alien imperial power. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Defiance and watched the blue curve of her home planet fall away behind them as the human fleet departed for enemy territory. 6 months ago, humanity had been facing extinction, under alien bombardment. Now they were carrying the war directly to the Dominion Empire using ships that combined the best of both human and alien technology. The Defiance was humanity's masterpiece of hybrid engineering, built from the hull of a captured Dominion dreadnought but equipped with weapons and systems that no alien engineer could have imagined. Captain Jennifer Walsh had led the deep space reconnaissance missions that located the nearest Dominion staging area, a massive orbital platform around a red giant star where the aliens maintained supplies and reinforcements for their expansion into human space. Dr. Chang's weapons development teams had created something that terrified even their creators: adaptive weapons that learned from each use and evolved to overcome whatever defenses they encountered. These systems represented the ultimate fusion of human creativity with alien technology, producing results that neither species could have achieved alone. The journey to the Dominion staging platform took 2 weeks using captured alien faster than light technology that human engineers had somehow improved. Where Dominion ships required complex calculations and careful planning for each hyperspace jump, human modifications allowed for rapid course changes and emergency exits that gave Earth forces tactical advantages no alien commander expected. Colonel Jake Peterson had adapted his guerrilla warfare expertise for space combat operations and now commanded the assault forces preparing to attack the alien base. His soldiers had learned to think like both human resistance fighters and alien strategists, combining the best tactical approaches from both species into something entirely new. The assault on the Dominion platform began not with direct attack, but with Peterson's specialty, psychological warfare designed to turn the enemy's strengths against them. Human specialists used neural interface technology to convince the platform's artificial intelligence systems that the base was under attack by traditional Dominion enemies rather than the primitive humans they had been warned about. The massive orbital station activated its defensive systems and began firing on its own support fleet while human forces approached from unexpected angles. Alien commanders found themselves fighting their own base while trying to understand why their most advanced AI systems had apparently suffered complete system failures. But the true demonstration of human wrath came when Captain Ben Rodriguez returned from what everyone believed had been a suicide mission. 3 months earlier, he had volunteered to lead a small squadron on a desperate journey to gather intelligence about Dominion territory and strength. His ships had been presumed lost when they failed to return on schedule. Rodriguez emerged from hyperspace leading a fleet of modified human vessels that had somehow survived a journey to the very heart of Dominion space. His ships carried intelligence that changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemies. The Dominion Empire was not the unstoppable force they claimed to be, but simply the most recent in a long line of galactic empires that ruled through fear rather than genuine strength. The information Rodriguez brought back revealed that the Dominion controlled their vast territory through a combination of overwhelming initial force and the psychological impact of their reputation for invincibility. Once that reputation was broken, their actual military strength was far more limited than they wanted their enemies to believe. More importantly, Rodriguez had made contact with resistance movements on dozens of worlds throughout Dominion space. Species that had been conquered years or decades earlier were organizing rebellions using weapons and tactics shared through human communication networks. The war for Earth had inspired a galactic uprising that was spreading faster than Dominion forces could respond. The attack on the staging platform became a complete victory, as human forces captured not only the base itself, but also detailed intelligence about Dominion military operations throughout the sector. Admiral Morrison found herself commanding a fleet that controlled the primary alien supply line into human space and possessed enough firepower to threaten Dominion territory directly. Dr. Chang's analysis of captured alien records revealed the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. In less than 1 year, a single species had developed from primitive spaceflight to galactic military power while simultaneously inspiring rebellions that threatened the stability of an empire that had dominated local space for centuries. The Dominion fleet that had originally come to conquer Earth was now scattered and demoralized, their forces either destroyed, captured, or infected with human-designed computer viruses that made their own technology unreliable. Commander Zethkar remained a prisoner aboard his own flagship, which had become a floating laboratory where human scientists studied alien technology and psychology. Captain Walsh's reconnaissance teams reported that Dominion forces throughout The sector were retreating toward their core territories while fighting desperate defensive actions against rebellions that were erupting on world after world. The empire that had seemed invincible was revealing itself to be a hollow shell that depended entirely on the fear of conquest rather than the ability to maintain control. The transformation was complete. Humanity had not simply defended their world but had weaponized their own greatest characteristics: creativity, adaptability, refusal to surrender, and the ability to inspire others through example. These traits had proven to be more powerful than any technology the Dominion possessed. Morrison received reports from across known space as the human communication network spread news of victory to every enslaved species in Dominion territory. The message was simple but revolutionary. The age of easy conquest was over, and any empire built on fear could be brought down by a species that refused to be afraid. The war that had begun with alien ships threatening Earth was ending with human fleets protecting liberated worlds throughout the galaxy. Humanity had discovered that their apparent weaknesses were actually strengths that no other species possessed, and those strengths were now defending the freedom of civilizations across the stars. The Defiance and her sister ships patrolled space, lanes that had been controlled by the Dominion for generations, ensuring that trade flowed freely between worlds that were learning what it meant to be free. The wrath of humanity had become a force that protected rather than conquered, defended rather than destroyed, and offered hope to every species that had ever faced overwhelming odds. Commander Zethkar sat alone in what had once been his private quarters aboard the flagship that no longer belonged to him. The walls that had displayed his 20 years of military victories now showed human star charts marking liberated worlds throughout what had been Dominion space. The empire he had served faithfully was crumbling as species after species threw off their chains and joined the growing rebellion. President Harrison's final transmission had arrived that morning, broadcast on all frequencies, so that every surviving Dominion ship would receive the message simultaneously. The human leader did not demand unconditional surrender or threaten total destruction as Dominion commanders would have done. Instead, he offered something that no conquered species had ever received from their conquerors: a choice. The remaining Dominion forces would be allowed to return home safely with their ships and personal equipment intact. No human forces would pursue them or attack their core territories. In exchange, they would carry a message to every world still under Dominion control. The age of conquest through fear was ending, and any empire that relied on enslaving others would face the combined wrath of every free species in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Morrison had personally delivered President Harrison's message to Zethkar in his converted quarters. She came not to gloat over a defeated enemy, but to try understanding how such a massive military failure had occurred. The human leader seemed genuinely curious about the psychology that had driven the Dominion's expansion across so many worlds. War was familiar to you, Morrison told the defeated alien commander as she studied the tactical displays that showed the current state of galactic civilization. You had fought the same kind of war 17 times and won 17 victories using exactly the same approach: overwhelming force applied to predictable enemies who thought like you did. Zethkar found himself explaining military doctrine to an enemy who had destroyed everything he believed about warfare. The Dominion had built their empire on a simple principle: technological superiority combined with ruthless application of force would break the spirit of any resistance. Every species they had encountered had followed predictable patterns of fear, negotiation, token resistance, and eventual surrender. But humans fight differently, Morrison continued as she examined reports from across known space. We don't fight wars to win battles or achieve political objectives. We fight wars to survive as a free species. When survival is at stake, we don't just adapt to new situations. We transform those situations into something entirely different. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. In less than 1 year, Humanity had taken everything the Dominion thought they knew about warfare and rendered it obsolete. Human forces had not simply defeated alien technology, but had improved it, modified it, and turned it against its creators in ways that should have been impossible. Dr. Lisa Chang's final analysis report had become required reading throughout. The galaxy as liberated species tried to understand how humanity had accomplished such a rapid transformation from helpless victims to galactic liberators. The report identified the key factors that had made human victory possible despite massive technological disadvantages. Humans had weaponized their own greatest apparent weakness, their inability to accept defeat gracefully. Where other species eventually acknowledged when resistance was futile, humans treated impossibility as merely another problem to be solved through creativity and determination. This refusal to surrender had created a psychological weapon more powerful than any technology. The neural interface breakthrough had revealed something fundamental about human consciousness that no other species possessed. Human minds operated in patterns that confused artificial intelligence systems designed by more logical species. Creativity, intuition, and willingness to attempt solutions that should not work had become devastating weapons against enemies who relied on predictable responses. Captain Ben Rodriguez had submitted his intelligence report about conditions throughout Dominion space before the war began. His findings showed that the Empire had always been more fragile than it appeared, held together by reputation rather than actual strength. Once that reputation was broken by human resistance, the entire structure had proven vulnerable to collapse. The revolution had spread beyond anything the Dominion could control. Species that had been enslaved for generations were not simply rebelling, but were sharing human-developed weapons and tactics with other conquered worlds. The technology that had once made the Dominion invincible was now being used against them by enemies who understood it better than its creators. Major Ryan Cooper had documented the complete transformation of Dominion military technology under human influence. Alien AI systems that had been corrupted by human neural patterns were now operating according to principles of creativity and adaptability rather than rigid programming. The Empire's own weapons had become tools of liberation. Morrison explained to Zethkar that humanity had never intended to become a galactic military power, but had been forced to develop these capabilities by the threat of extinction. Human innovation had been driven not by aggression, but by the desperate need to protect their freedom, and eventually the freedom of others facing similar threats. The defeated alien commander found himself understanding something that contradicted everything the Dominion had taught him about conquest and control. Military power meant nothing without tactical wisdom. Technological superiority was useless against creative thinking, and the greatest weapons in the universe were not more powerful guns, but more determined minds willing to use them. Colonel Jake Peterson had written the new manual for galactic warfare that was being distributed to every free species throughout known space. The document explained how determination could overcome technology, how creativity could defeat superior numbers, and how the willingness to sacrifice for freedom could inspire others to fight for their own liberation. The Dominion fleet prepared for its final departure from human space, carrying news that would reshape galactic civilization forever. They had learned that conquest itself could be conquered, that even the most powerful empire could be defeated by a species that simply refused to submit, and that freedom was a force more powerful than any weapon. As the alien ships jumped to hyperspace and disappeared into the void, humanity began the long process of helping liberated worlds rebuild their civilizations without the threat of conquest hanging over them. The war was over, but the galaxy would never again be the same. Human patrols now protected trade routes between worlds that were learning to govern themselves after generations of imperial control. The wrath of humanity had become a guardian force that defended the right of every species to determine their own destiny among the stars.